I welcome you to our 1-hour workshop on making your content accessible. So today's agenda is going to include a brief introduction as to why accessibility is important, and then we'll cover how accessibility is achieved. This will include accessible practice tips and then applying accessibility in different file types, as well as a demonstration on a mock syllabus. So why accessibility is important. Historically, the Office of Civil Rights defined accessible as when a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a person without a disability in an equally effective and equally integrated manner with substantially equivalent ease of use. It's a mouthful, of course. But the key words in this definition are opportunity. Individuals with disabilities must have the same chances to acquire information, interact with others, and access services as individuals without disabilities. Effectiveness. The experience for individuals with disabilities should be as successful and productive as it is for those without disabilities. Integrated. Individuals with disabilities should be able to participate to the best extent possible in the same settings and interactions as those without disabilities. And then substantially equivalent ease of use. The level of effort and ease should be comparable for individuals with and without disabilities. Before we get to accessible practice tips, let's talk about how people are impacted by various disabilities. Without knowing this, designing and using accessible practices becomes somewhat meaningless. You tend to question, why am I doing this? Why is this important? Disabilities can impact all of these actions. It's important to consider that many disabled people experience more than one of these impacts for any given disability. Also, people often have more than one disabling health condition. Think of how much your brain does for your body. If your brain is not operating at 100%, it could impact any one of these things. I'd like to share some examples of these actions impacted by disability. For example, vision. If someone is blind or has vision impairment, they may use a screen reader to access materials. Color blindness is also an important consideration for vision. So ensuring your document has good contrast is important, and we'll explain that a little later in terms of what that means. Also, hearing. If someone is deaf or hard of hearing in an environment where the majority of people communicate verbally, they will have a disability when it comes to communication. In turn, if I went to a school for the deaf, who doesn't know sign language, could be the person with the disability in terms of my inability to communicate in the same way that the entire population of that school is communicating, which is American Sign Language. While the deaf community needs transcripts for videos, captions and transcripts for videos, people for whom English is a second language will benefit from them as well. In terms of transcripts, also their benefit to people who are blind who want to just review the auditory content using their screen reader. So movement, someone with paralysis, cerebral palsy, or a broken arm or hand may need to use a keyboard only to access materials. Movement also pertains to vestibular disease, such as migraine or vertigo. These folks would benefit from options for VR assignments, virtual reality assignments, that is, which could trigger illness, or also if they could have less panning and flashes in videos, that would be beneficial for their health. As faculty, you have the opportunity to make inclusive choices when using technology. It's important to remember. Disabilities that impact thinking, remembering, and learning, such as dyslexia, learning disabilities, and ADHD, will benefit from simple language, alternative descriptions, and visuals. And people who struggle with communicating will benefit from alternative ways of participating in class. Lastly, people with mental health disabilities, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, or depression, may need more absences, flexible deadlines, alternative testing, and frequent breaks. Some people who struggle with social relationships could benefit from alternative options for group work. So there's a lot of things to consider when you look at just this simple list of what disability can impact. I like this visual from an older version of Microsoft's Inclusive Use Toolkit because it breaks down disabilities related to touch, sight, hearing, and speaking in categories of permanent, temporary, and situational. And this gives us a good understanding of the scope of disability as well as the environmental or situational impact. In looking at the varied disabilities of touch, sight, hearing, and speaking, ask yourself, how would you design your materials if the prospective audience in your class had these 12 people in them? I know it's a lot to ask, so just asking you to consider that as we move forward. Another important consideration is the appearance of disability. I don't know if you've ever heard someone say, he doesn't look disabled. It's important to keep in mind that some disabilities can be identified visually, such as injured limbs, paralysis, Down syndrome. However, the majority of disabilities cannot be identified visually. A person who looks like you or me could actually be disabled in some aspect of their life. I know this sounds cliche, but you really don't know what someone is dealing with on a daily basis. Post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD is one of those examples. From the outside, that person with PTSD may look like us and be typically functioning as a person. However, if triggered by an experience or sudden sound or phrase, that person may function in a manner not conducive to them completing their tasks. That student may have an accommodation requiring that they take tests at a test center, or rather than a crowded room, or if using a VR headset, that they have alternatives to participate in the class if that's something that is not able to be completed. So I want to get to the accessibility practices. Now, accessible content creation practice 1, and we're breaking these up into separate practices so it's easier for you to digest. Because if I were just to give you one page and say you have to do this, 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 and this, you're going to be like, what? So accessible practice 1 is adding alt text to images. Alt text is short for alternative text, and it's a text substitute for a non-text content such as images. And alt text, is important to know, is critical for users of screen readers, since screen readers read text only. And the alt text for an image will be read instead of the image itself. To write effective alt text, you need to consider the context of the image and what the image is communicating to users. The same image used in different contexts will often require different alt text. As you see on the example on this slide, we have an image of a white dog being walked on a leash in the public garden in Boston. On a page about activities about what visitors can do in the public garden, this image is communicating that walking dogs on a leash is a possible activity. So appropriate alt text might be person walking a dog on a leash in the public garden in Boston. On the other hand, imagine a page with about dog breeding and their behavior and walking. Here, the dog breed and temperament is important information for the users. So appropriate alt text might be relaxed, Samoyed, I can't say that name right, mix being walked on a leash. So it is important to consider the context of the material around the image that you're using to succinctly describe that image so that it's effective for the users. And you should aim to succinctly describe what the image is communicating rather than the entire content of the image. So, I mean, you don't have to say leaves are on the grass and there's water in the background, or, you know, all of that additional information, but be concise, because a lot of software, particularly Word, will limit the amount of alt text that you can use. I think it's 175 characters. Is that correct, Eva? I believe it is. Um, but so you do have limits as to how much you can include for alt text. Okay, so more about the creation practice one, the alt text decision tree. So there are a few rules basically to consider when you're providing alt text. And what we've provided here is the link on the screen, which will take you to a text decision tree that can help you figure out what to do for special cases. So if you provide content that is very image heavy, it's going to be very beneficial for you to read this decision tree and go through it. Some of the things on the decision tree, images used purely for visual decoration or images in which the meaning is conveyed in surrounding text should usually have empty or no alt text. In many programs, you can indicate it as a decorative image, and then the screen reader will skip over that image or just say decorative image and move on. So that is one consideration. Another, any image that includes readable text content should replicate that text in the alt text exactly. So I think a good example of this is like a chart or a table, and being able to replicate that. But like I said, the one caveat on that is you have like 175 characters usually before it's cut off. And I will show you this in demonstration later. The third tip is image icons that communicate important information, such as a file type icon or a phone icon, should just have that relative alt text. So in other words, instead of describing outline of a phone with the black outline and white background, you would just say phone. And then the next information probably would be the phone number. And that's how the screen reader would read it, which would be very effective for that screen reader user. Another tip is most alt text should not include things like photo of, picture of, or image of. In other words, that's indicating the medium. And this is because when a screen reader is reading through and it gets to an image, it will always say image of and then the description. So if your description includes the words image of, it's going to say image of, which is redundant. So just including that the general description without the characterization, photo of, picture of, or image of is going to be very helpful for that screen reader user. For information that can't be discerned from the image, such as use, or actually not such as, but use a caption instead of alt text. And we're talking about like just a caption below the image itself. For example, that dog's name is Saber, but we can't tell that from the image, so it belongs in a caption below the image. And that was the dog in the previous slide that we were talking about. Complex images such as charts and diagrams, as I had discussed earlier, should usually have their contents described in the surrounding text, so the person using the screen reader can glean the same information as the person navigating it visually. And lastly, you should never use a file name such as image236.jpg for alt text. And it's something that you have to keep your eyes open for, because unfortunately, some programs will automatically insert the file name as the alt text. And it's your responsibility to go in and edit that alt text. And we will show you how to do that in demo. And one bonus tip, while we focused here on images, the same principles of alt text also apply to multimedia and other non-text content. Substantially equivalent access means that any content not represented in text form should be provided in text form with similar ease of use. For example, audio podcasts should include a text transcript, and videos should include captions as well as a transcript, for reasons that I discussed earlier, so it's beneficial for both people who are deaf and blind. The captions will likely be used by people, like I said, who are deaf, and the transcripts for the person who is blind. Okay, so accessible content creation practice 2, using built-in heading styles. Heading styles are very beneficial for both sighted and non-sighted users. And I say this because for non-sighted users, if you effectively use heading styles, indicating what the heading 1 is, the heading 2, and so on, as you're building your content in somewhat outline form, you can easily produce a table of contents based on those heading styles. In turn, those heading styles help someone with a screen reader navigate through in the same way we do with our eyes. In the same way you can scan a page and see all of the bolded text is, the subtitle text. The person with a screen reader, if you're assigning that subtitle text heading 2, will be able to tab to each heading 2 and get to the area in the large document that they're looking to be in, instead of having to read the entire document or have the screen reader read the entire document. So using heading styles as a basic practice, indicating the document title, the main section headings, subheadings, the subsection headings as heading 3, and so on. Usually you don't go beyond heading 4. It's most common that it's just like headings 1, 2, and 3. It gets a little convoluted when you get past 4 in terms of managing the navigation for even the person with the screen reader. So it's recommended not to go beyond 4 unless you have a very, very complex document and have no choice. And it's one thing to remember is it's critical not to simply make your headings with a bigger font. Instead, use the built-in heading styles, such as headings from the style bar in Microsoft Word that's across the top. And you can format those to be any format that you want them to be, and I will show you that in the demo. Accessible content creation practice 3, using descriptive hyperlinks. So like section headings, hyperlinks provide a way for all users to navigate your materials, find relevant content, and get to where they need to go. And as with section headings, users of screen readers can navigate a document by reading a list of hyperlinks on the page. So when writing hyperlinks, they should be concise, descriptive, and it should be understandable without the context of the full sentence. For example, on the slide, we have, hold on a second. Oh, so we have contact your campus representative, right? And if we had the long URL, it wouldn't be super clear as to where that goes. But now that we've made that text saying contact your campus representative and attached the URL to that text, creating the hyperlink, we are making that accessible to that person using the screen reader, going through the list of links. And it just doesn't say things like click here or random words that are too general to understand where that link is taking you. You should always be able to understand whether you're viewing it with your eyes or somebody is viewing it with a screen reader. You should be able to understand where you're going to go when you click on those words that are linked. And also, as we say here, the pitfalls, copying and pasting URLs, using click here or this link, like I had mentioned, repeating hyperlinks on the same page, and underlining text. I know a lot of people like to underline text because they feel it gives it emphasis, but in this time, what we see underlined text as is a link. And so you might be confusing your readers to believe that that text is actually a link when it is not. So it's important to not underline text unless it is a created link that should be underlined. Okay, content creation practice number 4, accessible content creation. Using high contrast color and avoid communication solely with color. So color is a powerful tool in your creation toolbox, but it's also easy to misuse. Two of the most common ways that color can present accessibility issues are contrast and using it to communicate meaning. And contrast is the difference or luminance or brightness between colors. And typically we're talking about background colors and text because that's what's most important in terms of readability. And low contrast colors, now I have examples in this slide. That the first example, black text on white and white text on black is high contrast, right? The second example, we have two levels of gray on gray in both the upper and lower, and they're very difficult to read. They are low contrast. And it's not just because they're difficult to read, it's because they have actually been tested. If you're using color wisely, you're testing your colors using a contrast checker prior to selecting those colors. And that's actually part of the selection process. The third example here, blue on white, this dark blue is very accessible. If you're using a light blue, it probably wouldn't pass accessibility using the test checker that you see on the right. And the last, it's kind of iffy when you use green and red because it's very difficult to discern between those colors, especially when someone has red-green color blindness. That's one type of color blindness where a person cannot see reds and greens or discern between them. So both of those may look gray, and that might be a complete wash to a person who has red-green color blindness. The slide or the information you see on the right of this slide is actually copied from the WebAIM contrast checker. And this checker allows you to put the colors in using hex codes or using a scale, like just dragging the scale to the lightness or darkness of a particular color. And you choose the two colors that you want to use for your text and background, and it will tell you what the contrast ratio is. Now, the contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1 is usually accessible for most text. This one in the example here reads 7.88 to 1, and it is very highly accessible with normal, large text and graphical objects. So it tells you for all of those things because there are different applications to color. Obviously, it's not just text and background, it's graphical objects, it's different size text, and your contrast checker will help you with that. Thank you. Also on the screen, there are a series of contrast checkers that you can use. And actually Eva made this slide, and she gave us QR codes for WebAIM, for a TGBI color contrast analyzer, Toptal colorblind web page filter, because and Pilestone color vision simulator. Now the last two will not check and determine the exact contrast for your item that you're trying to use, but what they will show you is what it looks like from different types of color blindness. So if you have to make your case for using certain colors in, say, a presentation or anything like that when you're collaborating with colleagues, you can open up that Pilestone color vision simulator and upload your slide and show your colleagues how it looks from one person's color blindness to another, from one type of color blindness to another. So, so the first two resources are your direct determining contrast, and the second two are showing examples of what it looks like for people with color blindness. Okay, I threw in a practice, accessible content creation practice 6, and that is using bulleted text or numbered lists, bulleted lists or numbered lists instead of tables. Using bulleted and numbered lists enhances accessibility by providing clear structure, navigability, and readability, especially for users relying on assistive technologies like screen readers or those with cognitive challenges. There are a number of reasons why this is important. One is improved structure for screen readers. So the bulleted list, when you're using the format tools, the bullet format tools, will identify for the screen reader as a list that has that content in it. It will announce the number of items on a list and read each item in a sequence. So it will help those users to skip or navigate lists efficiently as well. Better comprehension for all users, sighted or non-sighted. Lists break down dense information into manageable chunks, which reduces cognitive load. This will help users scan and understand content faster. It supports neurodiverse users or learners who benefit from ordered or grouped information. And it will also add consistency across devices. So built-in styles adapt well to different screen reader or screen sizes and formats, ensuring visual clarity, consistent experience for sighted and non-sighted users. Okay, what I wanted to show you here, because you've been given a lot of information today, and before we go into demo, I want to show you how this information is applied. And I thought, given that we just talked about bulleted lists, I'd create some bulleted lists for you and share which of these practices that we went over would be executed in which file type. So for example, in documents, we would use heading styles, as we talked about, alt text for images, ensure good contrast, use descriptive hyperlinks, and then bulleted lists. And what I will cover in the demo is table headers as well. If you must use tables, there is something you can do to format your table to help someone using a screen reader be able to identify the headings that are on your table for each cell that is read, and that is indicating a header row. So for slides, it's a little bit different because you know how in slides you have text boxes. So it's not all inline text. It's different text boxes, and you decide when you're building your slide how those text boxes are arranged, whether, you know, from back to front or front to back, however. Really, it would be read from a screen reader from front to back. So by using the arrange feature in say something like PowerPoint, you would be indicating the reading order. And one way to test reading order is to tab, when you're sitting on a slide, is to tab through that slide, and it will show you the reading order that the screen reader will be reading in as well. So alt text for images, contrast, descriptive hyperlinks, and bulleted lists, that's all the same for slides. But the big difference with slides is that reading order and indicating which reading order things are going in, because you're working with a bunch of separate text boxes and image boxes when you're working with slides. Video, it's important to use concise narration instead of saying, as you see this over here, you would say the button in the upper right corner of the page, or the, you know, whatever you're speaking of. And so using that concise narration is helpful for someone who's not seeing the slide at all. It has to be meaningful with your narration alone. And using captioning for video, a lot, and most tools, particularly that we use at UMass Boston, have auto captioning, but auto captioning is only about 85% accurate. So it's very important that you go in and edit your captioning to make sure it's 100% accurate. or else it's going to be much less meaningful for your students who are using it. And then transcripts. Having transcripts maybe at the bottom of where you're posting your video is going to be helpful for students on many levels, whether they're students who are blind, students who are traveling and listening to the lecture again to make sure they're learning the materials, and all kinds of situations, but it's important to have those transcripts as well. So what we're looking at right now is an example of a not so accessible syllabus, right? And we don't know that yet until we run the accessibility checker, or we go through with these tips that we just gave you, and you check to see that headings are applied, that images have alt text, and all of the other things. But a lot of times we're busy, and it's important to know that you can use the accessibility checker in your tool, for example, is in Word. So I'm going to go up to Review, and I'm going to click Check Accessibility. And it's giving me a list, and I have some things that are checked here. Hard to read contrast. If I look at that, it says, good job, there are no accessibility issues, right? So all the checks are positive, meaning there's no accessibility. But if there's a 1 or a 2, that's how many accessibility issues there are. Like, for example, this first one, this is missing alt text. What kind of text do you think you would characterize this as? Does anybody want to volunteer? Is it meaningful text in terms of the syllabus? Is it decorative text? So there's two things I can do here. In Microsoft Word, I can ask it Word to generate a description and a close-up of a logo. It usually doesn't do a great job when you have it generate the description, right? Or I can mark this as decorative if it's not something that is meaningful to the purpose of this syllabus, which I would say that would be the case. So I marked it as decorative. And I'm going to go to the next thing. Use of merged or split cells. So that's one thing that we didn't put on this checklist, because we don't really want to encourage you to use tables. There are many cases where tables are used and you could just use inline text. In this case, you can see there's a merge table. There's a merge cell here. These 3 cells at the top were merged into one. That makes it very difficult for a screen reader to navigate that, because the screen reader is not sure, is exams over 1, 2, or final? It doesn't work very well for a screen reader when you use merged cells. So that's the first issue. The second issue, if I click on the square in the upper left corner of the table and then right click, I can go to Table Properties. And it wasn't selected to repeat the header row at the top of each page. So I'm going to do that, but that still doesn't solve the problem of the merged cells. So that's just something to consider when you're putting your content in. A lot of times I know with syllabi, you copy and paste information, but you don't necessarily have to use tables for this class schedule right here. Week 1, course introduction, chapter 1 can be put in line. And I will show you by popping over to the other accessible document. So here's the accessible, right? So the accessible document, this class schedule is here, and the header row is indicated, but What we did also tell you is that for things that are very image heavy, such as tables, you should do alt text. So when I go into this table's properties and I went and I put in every piece of alt text from 1 through 7, but it only saved up to that many characters. So that's another reason I would discourage you from using tables if at all possible, because you can't really characterize all of the information in alt text that's in this table. However, what you can do is, if you see below, I did an example of class schedule, and this class schedule is using a heading 2, because heading 2 here is selected. And the week 1 course introduction is heading 3. And this reading chapter 1, which is probably just one of the activities, you would also have like assignments and things like that in this list, is normal text. And so what I just did is I copied the information I tried to put in the alt text, and now I can reformat it. So for example, this is the week 3, right? So it's heading 3. And then I'm going to go up to the color fill button up here at the top. And I am going to just give it a highlight across the board. So it kind of looks like it's in a cell, but it's not. It's just highlighted. And it distinctly divides those sections for the schedule. So for some people who are concerned that the table is much more visual and much more easy to organize and see your material, I do question that, because I think you can create inline text that is equally effective and far more accessible. Does anybody have any questions about that? So I would highlight this and click normal, and then go to the next one, click heading 3, highlight. Oh, I messed up.
I just wanted to quickly note that for folks using Microsoft Word frequently, if you do have a visual style that you want for a particular heading, you can update that heading style to reflect the visual style in the document, so that all headings of that particular style use that visual style across the board. So
Right.
that's something that you know, if you do want a particular visual style on that, you can adjust the entire heading style, get one of the headings as you want, and then update to match selection right down there.
Right. You could either do one of two things. You could modify the style. And if you click modify style, it opens, I don't know if you could see the pop-up that it opened. So, and it allows you to modify the style, or you can, as Eva said, make edits here to whatever you want this style to be. Like maybe I want this style to be 14 point, or leave it 12 point, but a different font. And I'll change it to Arial, right? And then I can go over to where it says heading 3 on the right, click on this drop down and choose update to match selection, and everything that I have selected as a heading 3 will be updated. And did you just see how it included the color, the background color too? Which then each time you're fixing this, let's see, you just highlight this and choose heading 3, highlight this, choose normal text, and you keep going on that. And then you can, and if you, I mean, I just picked this yellow color, but you could pick whatever color you want to delineate between the weeks, so that it's easy for someone who's visually scanning to see where one week ends and one begins. So going back to, I'm going to review this, review, check accessibility. And this is the example of the accessible syllabus, and it is pretty much saying everything is accessible except this merge or split cell scenario. So does anyone have any suggestions how we would fix that?
I think a good example here might be simply saying, because in this case, exams one, two, and final, projects one, two, and final, um, those do not need to be you could simply repeat exams. So you could say homework 15%, exam one, exam two, exam final exam.
Yes.
There's
Yeah,
no need to have the overall category of exams and then one, two, and final underneath it.
perfect. And then this would say project one, project two, final project. And then we could eliminate that top row. The only thing is, let's see. Delete cells, shift up. I think it's shift up. We still have this one over here to get rid of, right? Okay, now we have something that's more accessible, and you could still add color to this. If you want, if you so desired to make it stand out, you can make it blue. But then you would have to go in and make the text white. Oh, not red. So that it stands out. But if we don't need, oh yeah, that's right, we don't need this top part at all, right? Is that what you were saying, Eva?
Yeah, I would probably just rebuild this personally because
You did.
editing is very can be very weird with merge cells. But yeah, I would. I mean, this could
Yeah,
also just be done as a bulleted list. This is a great example of a table that does not need to be a table because all it's communicating is a single piece of information with each accompanied item. So exam one is 15%, exam two is 15%. It's simply communicating a relationship between the one piece of information and the next.
right, exactly. And as we showed here, I mean, you can really make it stand out in terms of as a title. The exam one could be like a header 3. Put the style pane back, heading 3, and so on and so forth, or however you decide to do that. But the table in this case doesn't seem to be very necessary. Does that make sense? Eva, can you think of a time when a table is necessary? Because I honestly can't. I
I mean,
know a lot
absolutely.
of tables.
I think there's contexts in which, especially when you have tabular data that is more complex. I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit for especially for faculty who are taught to build a course schedule or a syllabus in a particular way, and you might have just always been taught to use tables for something like that, and you might not really need to use a table at all. If you're conducting scientific research, tables might be very, very necessary to present your data. They're certainly necessary in a number of contexts, but we use them a lot by default in contexts in which they aren't really necessary. So it's, I think, important to just be thoughtful about when you're going to use one, what's the complexity of the information you're presenting, and how critical is it that it be presented specifically in a table versus a similar method such as a bulleted list.
Right. right. And like, and you know, we only have the readings here, but you could have assignments, discussions, and of course we don't have to have those so far apart. But anyway, you could also just bullet those, and then they're indented. It looks nice. It's very visual, and but also very organized and very accessible for a screen reader to use that versus tabbing through, you know, the table. And anybody have questions about that in terms of tables versus lists?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I wonder in that example you were just doing, maybe it's reading, maybe it's linking to a paper book and then it just says chapter 2 to 3 and that's fine. But when it's linking to the actual reading, like another website that has the reading on it or something, how does that interact with the navigating a page by hyperlink sort of concept? I would think that a syllabus is someplace where you might have quite a few links to the material. It's not just a list of what we're going to do, it's the actual how to get to what we're going to do. Or do you recommend that it's not the how we get to what we want to do?
I recommend, especially if it's an online course, that the links to get to what you're going to do are going to exist in each individual weekly module.
Okay.
And this way, because if you start putting a bunch of links in your syllabus to all of the content that you're saying that you're going to teach, then you're essentially teaching from the syllabus instead of teaching from the online course and learning management system. So I even advise when I'm working with faculty that when in a course, when you're creating your agenda, your weekly agenda in the modules, not to put the links in that agenda, or the students are just going to, go ahead and not explore the rest of the weekly content that you have in store for that student or those students. And Eva says, typically, if I'm linking, you could speak out, Eva, if you want.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, for readings, my typical practice, and I think this is good for faculty to do as a whole, as model citation practices for students as well, so that we're not kind of being sloppy with our citation practices, and then our students are being asked to follow very precise, specific citation practices. So typically I'll follow a consistent pattern in every reading I give to students. If I'm linking that reading in, I will follow the pattern. Sometimes it's, depending on the discipline and the context, it's author name, article or textbook name, and then if there's a chapter, that information. But having at the very least, like, the textbook name alongside chapter two, so it's not just a kind of floating link that says chapter two and it's unclear what that is or where that goes. Providing some of that kind of grounding context is just, I think, good practice for all students. So I always try to make sure that everything I'm linking in is not just kind of a random text bit, but a very clear kind of miniature citation.
Yeah, I mean, this was an example. The syllabi that I was showing you were examples from another university's accessibility team that they provide accessible and inaccessible documents for you to share and teach from. But if I as far as I can remember, when I'm teaching, I always, you would say chapter 2 of, and then put the author's name or the title of the book. So it's clear, because a lot of times we have more than one text that we're teaching from. It's a great question.
I'll also say that this is something to look out for when you're uploading things. So, like, if you upload files to your course, a lot of times when you add those into your course for your students, it's just going to default to your file name. So that's something that, it takes a little bit extra intentional effort to rename all of that, but it is worth it for accessibility as well as for clarity for your students.
So this session was really intended just to give you the basis of what you need to know to make documents accessible, and also a little bit of videos and images, but just so it's not so overwhelming when you're talking about making all of your content accessible. Another tip to remember is, which I think I ended too soon on that, but don't solely rely upon your automated tools. Rely on what you know about accessibility. Like, make it so that it is second nature to use your headings. It's second nature to do hyperlinks or bulleted lists, and try not to use chart or tables. But the accessibility tools and the session that we're going to have in 2 days, Eva, that you're going to do on Use Your Panorama, is a great session, but it's better not to rely wholeheartedly on that to fix your content. You should be proactively making that content accessible and using the practices we taught you today. Anything else you'd like to say, Eva?
Yeah, just wanted to extend an invitation to folks to please feel free to join us this Thursday at noon. Same Zoom location for the Use Your Panorama to Improve Your Course Accessibility session. We'll be talking about a wide variety of different components of the tool, how you can use them to improve course accessibility, to generate alternative file formats, to run course reports. So please feel free to join us this coming Thursday. I can't believe it's already October.
I know.
Please feel free to join us on Thursday at noon.
And keep in mind, I mean, these two sessions do complement each other, because what you've learned today is what's going to be addressed in Eva's session in terms of what the system may catch and ask you to fix if it's not done correctly from the start. And there's going to be a lot of content that we have, like older content we've inherited, that is not going to be exactly the way we need it to be for accessibility purposes. So that's not all on us, but as long as we work toward getting things where they need to be in terms of accessibility, we'll be in good shape. So we hope to see you all in 2 days to learn more about remediating content that you already have.